So let's continue that conversation around the bills and bonds market. Just in case you missed it, the primary market auction last week was overbought about 1.8 times, with yields closing much lower. The central bank this week will be offering 112.52 billion naira the treasury bills auction. Then on the 21st, which is on Wednesday, yes, the debt office will be offering 70 billion naira, which is compared much lower than 140 billion naira earlier stated in the guided calendar for Q1 2018. Quite a lot of stories around the fixed income space. But the big news is that over the weekend is that the central bank is giving a clear indication now that we may have our first MPC in the first week of April, technically the 4th after we're done with the long Easter holiday, and then we'll be back to see those fresh faces across the room. We'll be live there on the ground for their first meeting. But the market has been moving on, ignoring the MPC, as it were, since the new year started. We had the last meeting late in 2017. So what you might just do without the MPC? But there are key issues around having your monetary policy committee meeting. Let's get this two-part conversation started with Omotola Abimbola, who is one of the investment analysts at AfroInvestors Live in the studios with us. Good morning.
Good morning, boss.
Hope you had a very nice weekend.
Yes, I did.
Okay, so let's look at the market's momentum without MPC across board, from equities to fixed income, currencies. So technically, folks are saying, do we really need MPC? We can't just do without them.
Well, we do need the MPC, although what we have observed is that in the last decade, the importance of the MPC has been more of form than substance, because outside of the MPC's purview, the CBN itself, has some monetary policy tools that it can use to influence the direction of the market. And in the last 2 to 3 years, the CBN has been relying heavily on that to influence policy direction. For instance, if you remember, towards the end of the administration of the former CBN governor, Governor Sanusi, the monetary policy rate, which is the main anchor rate that the MPC sets when they meet every year, every other 3 months, that main policy rate wasn't changed the last 2 years of the administration. And even in the earlier part of the current CBN governor's tenure, the MPR was flat until it was eventually, brought down before being jacked up again. So essentially, we thought without the MPC meeting, the CBN has some major policy tools, such as the OMO auction, the frequency of the OMO mop-ups, as well as the marginal rate or the clearing rate at those OMO auctions, to guide the direction of the market. And much more recently, the market has also been taking direction from fiscal authorities, because the domestic debt market is heavily dominated by the federal government. They are the heaviest player in the market. And in the last 2 to 3 years, they have sort of changed their debt strategy from a much more conservative, tone of foreign currency borrowing to a much more aggressive foreign currency borrowing, so as to reduce their debt servicing obligation. Because if you look at the reports issued by credit rating agencies on Nigeria in the past 2 or 3 years, by Moody's, Fitch, and S&P, the major concern has been that Nigeria's debt servicing obligation, as a ratio of revenue, it has risen significantly, up to about 50% towards the end of 2016. So there has to be a deliberate strategy to reduce that debt servicing obligation, so they can unlock, more borrowing potential and also improve on their credit rating. So taking a cue from this, the Ministry of Finance in the last 2 years, they have embarked on a deliberate strategy to reduce the volume of domestic debt issuance and increase foreign currency borrowing. So based on this monetary policy tool of the CBN and the fiscal policy strategy, the market has been taking direction as to where the use would be.
We will talk about, we'll break this down a little bit further, but in the conversation, Nigeria is not an exception in which you have the Monetary Policy Committee do nothing. 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, sometimes 5 years in other jurisdictions. So if a Monetary Policy Committee do nothing, and sometimes some folks just say, hey, boss, your MPC doesn't do anything this time around, they will keep doing nothing. So when MPC, a particular MPC does nothing, what guidance, what is the benefit of this meeting regularly as scheduled on the calendar, even if all rates parameters are left unchanged?
It is very important because the MPC is an independent committee of the Central Bank of Nigeria, comprising of 12 members, the Central Bank Governor, which chairs it, the 4 deputy governors, 3 members of the Board of Directors, 2 members nominated by the Central Bank Governor, and 3 others nominated by the federal government. Now, it is important as an analyst and for market participants to have an understanding of the thinking of the MPC committee members so as to form a guidance as to where the direction of monetary policy is, and also understand their own assessment of the status of the economy. So when you don't have these meetings, right, it doesn't really, it doesn't improve, it has an impact on the level of certainty of monetary policy, because for most market participants, they will be making decisions without seeing the overall picture and the thinking of the MPC members. For instance, after every MPC meeting, there's usually a personal statement of committee members released. And this personal statement will give you a full understanding of the assessments of the committee members themselves, of the economy, and their own guidance as to where the monetary policy to be and where the economy would be before the next meeting. So it is very important to have these meetings to understand the thinking of the MPC members.
This minutes of the MPC meeting and the personal statements of each members.
Correct.
If we have a full meeting, 11 or 12 people. So we're having about 11 statements here.
12?
Of about 12 individuals. What that does, to break what you said out, is that it gives us an idea of what each of these 12 individuals think. Both, including those who are, well, quote and unquote, officials of the central bank,
correct,
and those who are non-officials of the central bank. And what does that do? And what does that help investors and everyone in the economy to do?
It helps with certainty and planning and appropriate forward guidance. As much as possible, if you would observe, most central bank governors all over the world, particularly in the advanced world, they have more or less relied on forward guidance communication in trying to point market participants towards their plans, right? And the reason for this is that when they make monetary policies, they do not want the impact of the policies to result into a shock in the market, right? So, which is why they hold these meetings, frequently, and then the chairman of the meeting usually goes out to address the